Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Work, soon to be Radical Respect podcast. I'm Kim Scott, and
I'm Wesley Faulkner. Glad to be here on the show again. And we have for our guest, Dr. Phil, not that Dr. Phil. Let's
a
go ahead and
different
pass it on to
Dr.
here.
Phil.
Yes, and let him introduce himself. Doctor, please.
Hello, guys. Thank you for allowing me to be on the show. It's an honor. And yes, I'm Dr. Phil. Would you like me to tell a little bit more about myself?
Please.
Or?
A
Yes.
lot more about yourself.
You sound different, Dr. Phil.
Well, I also have hair up top, but you know how that goes. So I have 5 graduate degrees and a doctorate. I did everything in the field of education, from a assistant teacher to a teacher, a school psychologist, a counselor, assistant principal, a principal, in all areas from K to 12, a director of education, assistant superintendent, and area superintendent in some of the largest school districts in the United States. I had 300 schools and 210,000 students. I
Wow.
was also a superintendent in the rural area of Mississippi. And then I was a national ambassador for United States Department of Education. I did a lot of work with Amazon, Apple, and I was senior manager at Oracle, and so looked at developing health tech and those kind of things. Then I started my own company, Playbook, which is an innovative reading technology that uses artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and speech recognition to help children learn how to read. And then in my pastime or my, for fun, when I'm not building companies, I also have a couple of nonprofits. And then I've been a professor, adjunct professor for about 17 years. And then also I have a psychology company that helps schools do a lot of assessment, child find assessments, and those kind of things.
And do you sleep?
Yeah.
Well, I think I sleep, but I also think a couple of hours is what I consider sleep. But,
Oh my gosh.
You got more degrees than a thermometer.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And so before we jump into, I have a question for you about what's going on with teaching kids to read in Mississippi. There's been a lot written about that lately, and I would love to get your perspective on it.
Actually, in Mississippi,
Seems to be leading the way.
Yeah, the leading the way in reading. And so when I was a superintendent, I was also there on a task force with the state superintendent. We brought things in there like letters. We looked at changing the instructional model, providing support. But please understand that regardless, there's in the entire United States, 75% of fourth graders read below grade level.
Wow.
And so and then that's regardless of race, all those kind of, when you start factoring a race, so that's fourth graders. The
Wow.
entire population of African Americans, only 17% are proficient at the 8th grade level. So
Wow.
it gets scary. We know that that leads to dropouts. 73% of crime created in the United States created by high school dropouts. 82% of prison inmates have a reading impairment that just could have been some type of intervention. So the reason why I take reading is so serious, I know I'm probably boring you guys, but to me, it's a level of national security. Because one, we have the lowest level of dropouts. I mean, of high school graduates right now. They're less and less.
As a country, we do.
As a country,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
If you think about it, and when they talk about, when you look at the workforce, when everything is going to be high tech manufacturing and this kind of thing. And, and they even said in the year 2035, 85% of jobs that exist have not been invented yet, but it will have some aspect of technology and reading fluency. So that's why I kind of take that serious. But anyway, though, that's just me.
I'm with you.
Saving the world.
Yeah.
One reader at a time, right?
Yes. This reminds me of a podcast that I used to listen to. It was like a series, kind of like Serial. It was called Sold a Story by APM. I love that podcast. It, like unwrapping the way that this country has taught kids how to read or taught them how not to read. Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's near and dear to my heart as well. as a person who has dyslexia, I struggle with reading and knowing and hearing the story, and how we are not addressing how people read and how people can actually learn the right and proper way to read. I think you're doing a service that is actually helping generations of us, and I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that. Think about, so my tools, I'm dyslexic as well. So I was a struggling reader in third grade. My grandmother taught me how to read in fourth grade, and she passed away on my fifth grade birthday. But so let me just from a lay person. So my technology, it uses speech recognition, and not only, and we have no third party tools. So everything, is our proprietary engine. But not only can we hear speech, we can break it down to the phonemic level. So if you read the word bat, we hear b, at, or the lack thereof.
Wow.
So the reason why that's important, and we have a proprietary engine that can actually analyze errors, reading errors, and all those kind of things, and give recommendations and use AI in those. But the reason why that's important is because the only way that we assess reading right now is we quietly have a child read a paragraph or answer multiple choice questions. That's reading comprehension. That's not
Wow.
even basic reading. The issue is that students struggle so much trying to decode that they don't have enough energy to understand what they read, right? Like
Yeah.
all their effort, their brain power is going to decoding. But yet what we assess and make interventions based off of is reading comprehension. And just like you, Wesley, I mean, comprehension is not the issue. I can talk to you. We could talk all day. I'm saying, when you were a younger child, comprehension is not the issue. It's decoding. And then especially when you throw in something like dyslexia, and there's different forms of dyslexia, and you throw that in the mix, and it's like, that's bananas. And on top of that, by the way, dyslexia children are usually have one of the highest IQs. So take that.
Well, we don't want Kim to feel bad.
I don't know. Look, I failed kindergarten too. Maybe I have dyslexia, and because I couldn't learn to read. I don't know why I couldn't learn to read, but I couldn't. I had a hard time.
Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, it's like a vivid memory. There were 12 boxes of books in the back of the room, and we were supposed to have read one book from each box.
Right.
And somehow I didn't get this memo. and a friend of mine told me at the end of the year that I was supposed to have read these books, and I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that," and so I went and got the hardest book from the hardest box, because that was one my mom had read to me all the time.
Right.
And I read it. I had memorized it because I'd heard it so often. I read it to the teacher perfectly, and I was like, "I'm good." And then the teacher pulled out flashcards. And I didn't get any of it. Was a traumatic moment. I still remember crying till I was hyperventilating. Yeah, so I don't.
Oh, you should get tested.
Not yet. Seriously, not being able to read by third grade, the amount of shame causes anxiety in children. They actually say that they feel the same amount of shame as a child born to incest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is to be taken seriously.
It is. It is.
And we need to do better for our kids.
We do. They deserve
Absolutely.
That. Hey, listen, the problem is children are like, I don't know, I think it's 25 to 30% of the population, but they're 100% of our future.
Yes.
So we might want to get this right.
Yeah, but we're also talking about,
not only that, we love them.
We have book bans going on. We have different types of materials where people aren't allowed in school.
Yeah.
So it's children are under assault, and if you also remember, I don't want to get too political here, but the number one killer of kids is guns, and school shootings and the trauma that is with school, with the drills and all that stuff. Kids are endangered, and hopefully, we can help to make sure that they are our future, like they make it that far at least.
I mean, abstract words come from reading if you don't have it in your environment. And so the reason why that's important is because conflict resolution happens at the abstract level, not the concrete sensory level. If you only have it at the concrete sensory level, then that's the next step. If you want to run out of words, is physical altercations, and then some, also gun violence. And so, I mean, there's no way that you can solve problems, because, like I said, problems are at the abstract level if you don't have that level of vocabulary. And so even if you look at children of poverty by the age of 3 is actually exposed to 300,000 words. Children of professional households, it's over 3 million words by the age of 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And speaking of, go ahead.
Go ahead. I
was going to say, speaking of words, I think, Kim, you have a reading that we have for the podcast. And I would love to hear those as well, if you're okay with transitioning over to the reading portion of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is such an interesting conversation, so I hope we'll get back to it. But so where we are in the book is we've been talking about this taxonomy of bias, prejudice, bullying, discrimination, harassment, and physical violence. And now we're going back to what leaders can do about bias. So if you think about the taxonomy, we're going back to bias, to the beginning, and what leaders can do. And what I am asserting here, and again, think about what I'm saying and tell me where I'm wrong. I wrote another book called Radical Candor, and I want to walk that talk here. So tell me what makes sense and what doesn't make sense to you here. More importantly, what doesn't make sense. So a shared vocabulary helps people know what to say when they don't know what to say. I'm referring to unconscious bias here. Becoming aware of something one is unaware of usually requires another person to point it out. But pointing bias out is awkward. Most people don't know what to say exactly, and they fear retribution for pointing it out or looking like they are virtue signaling. That's why it's helpful to have a norm of disrupting bias publicly and a go-to phrase that they know, so they know what to say when they observe bias, whether it's directed at them or another person. As good behavior becomes acceptable, people start to engage in it, making it yet more acceptable, creating a virtuous cycle. On the one hand, if the usual response to bias is silence, bias gets reinforced. Our virtuous cycle becomes vicious. Let's avoid vicious cycles. Reassure your team that disrupting bias is not public criticism. It's a quick, collaborative correction and a sign of accountability. The first step to create a shared vocabulary. The first step is to create a shared vocabulary. Maybe I never really learned how to read. I'm having a hard time here. You are not the word dictator. Sit down with your team and get their suggestions for a common phrase that everyone can agree to use to point out bias. If everyone is speaking the same language to disrupt bias at work, upstanders and people harmed will find it much easier to speak up. People who said or did a biased thing will more quickly understand that this is a helpful correction, not a character assassination. The key in this step is to allow the team to pick their own vocabulary. If your team comes up with their own words or phrases rather than having you dictate them, they're more likely to actually use them. However, you do need to offer some guidance. Bias disruption will backfire if the phrases chosen are themselves unconsciously biased. Words matter. Give some time for your team to debate this. You can encourage I statements that invite everyone to consider the situation the way the speaker does. But the interruption doesn't have to be an I statement. It's not always easy to talk about disrupting bias with your team, and the conversation may be difficult. Some may feel that phrases like bias alert or yo trivialize the harm that bias does. Others may be irritated that you're wasting so much time on this, and you may feel stuck in the middle. Remind everyone of the goal: to disrupt bias without disrupting the meeting, to hold up a mirror for each other because you care about one another, not to attack people or to indulge in self-righteous shaming. Once a catchphrase is agreed upon, make sure everyone practices using it until the whole team knows how to deploy it quickly and kindly without drama. Make sure that it's not being weaponized. People should use it to invite others in, not to call them out. All right. What do you think? Would you do this in the classroom? Would you encourage kids when they notice each other saying things that are biased to say bias alert or yo or something else? I don't think you meant that the way it sounded.
I think it's easier to do that in a school setting than, like you said, in a leadership setting.
Yeah.
It really depends on the culture of the company that you're working for. In a school setting, that's almost expected to direct teach behavior, to direct teach and pay attention to social emotional character education, those kind of things. Probably use the word ouch
Yes.
a lot. And so that's the way that I've seen it done is, if you've been offended or something like that, just kind of use the word ouch when someone is projecting their biases. I think it will be harder in a work setting to do it.
So does that happen in the classroom very often? Actually, I taught a version of I did a sort of a presentation at my daughter's school, and that's what they do. They say "ouch," and then the person who said the biased thing can say "oops" and apologize.
Yeah, it depends on the culture of the school as
Yeah,
well. If
yeah.
if there are schools who focus, and there was a wave, a period that character education was taught.
Mhm.
By I think right now there's a swing towards the other direction. Not that character education is taught, but my gosh, there's so much protection of the truth. I think that doesn't allow for those things to happen right now in the school settings. And then you have a lot of urban schools where the priority of needs,
Yeah.
even though it is a high priority, the priority of needs is not there. It's really like a survival in a sense.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, let's talk about the truth. I mean, what I feel a little bit like with all this book banning. Well, anyway, let's talk about that in a minute. Wesley, tell me what you like and what you don't like about bias disruption and this notion of a shared vocabulary.
I was actually just struggling to deal with this in real time because I don't know if you noticed it, Dr. Phil. You were saying the word guys as a generic term.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about how do I say that that's not really an inclusive word? But it's like
Wave.
not, how do you say that
Wave
without,
flag.
I don't have one available, but I
Yeah.
should
I'm going to
be a
send you a
bit more
purple
prepared.
flag.
Yes. It can be one in which um, you don't want to be disruptive, but you also don't want to trigger someone's shame, right?
Yeah.
Some people have feel like they did the worst thing in the world, and that it's attacking their sense of self whenever you point out something that someone said,
I
and it
agree.
feels like you're attacking who they are. Oh, that's not who I am. That's not what I believe in, and those things can be extremely derailing.
They can
And
be.
it Yeah, and then it feels like then it just flips into where the perpetrator becomes the first person who feels like they've been victimized
Yeah.
by pointing out some of the harm that they caused, and then that pulls the attention away from the person who actually felt harm or feels like it was non inclusive, and so it's a delicate balance, and you have to read the room and you have to almost know the person. I think this leads more into what the radical candor is, that you have to know people personally and care deeply, and then they have to know that too if you're going to be able to do this in a setting
Yeah.
where it could
Without
be
a
sensitive.
relationship. Yeah. Without a relationship, I don't think uh, it, it can be as effective.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because people, like you said, people take offense to it. That person becomes defensive. They will not hear the rest of the words that you say. They're trying to formulate one. What is he? Is he calling me a bigot or
Yeah.
whatever it is? I'm being insensitive. Yeah, and it's some weird. It's a lot of strong research even about carrying stereotypes. So the research says that um, actually, when you're more exposed to your stereotype, it strengthens your belief. And so, for
Yep.
instance, if I say all black people are loud, and I come around black people who are not loud, and the minute one black person is loud, it justifies my stereotype,
Yeah.
even though everyone else was not. It
Yeah.
actually strengthens my stereotype. And so it was, in psychology, it was kind of crazy when we try to flood people around, the opposite of their beliefs. And it's just for some reason their mind just bypasses that and finds that one, thing
Yeah,
that.
confirmation bias,
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm only looking for the data that supports my point of view.
Yeah, and then regional has a lot to do with a lot of things. Like, for instance, ma'am. when I was in Mississippi and down south,
Mm-hmm.
we always say, "Ma'am, I went to the north," and people are so offended. Don't call me, don't call me ma'am, or when people say, "My dad, sir," don't call me sir. I'm like, I'm being respectful.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
calling me old? Or it's all those kind of things. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think that's why it's important for leaders to set up, like, we are gonna flag bias and
Mm-hmm.
to set the context, like, and help people build the kind of relationship where it is like, Dr. Phil, I don't know you very well, but I'm pretty sure you weren't gonna be offended by Wesley pointing out the "you guys" thing, you
No.
know? But also you agreed to come talk about bias with us, and I think that's why it's important to be able to talk about this, and to talk about it kind of openly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think also for shame, I think that it is one of the things that I have struggled with is that when I get accused, I'm just going to talk about myself. I don't know about everybody else, but when I get accused of saying or doing something biased, I feel very ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, I feel very ashamed if it's racial bias.
Mhm.
And and the thing that I've really tried to focus on doing is realizing that that's about me. Someone else didn't shame me. I feel ashamed because I just said something that implies I believe something that I don't
Mm-hmm.
consciously believe.
Right.
And it's my job to move through the shame. It's not my job to ask everybody else to dance around my shame.
Yeah.
Like, I got to own my own shame. I can't put that on other people.
Right. And
Absolutely.
there's things that are sensitive that
Yeah.
even when you try to dance around it, it still pokes people, right?
Yeah.
And it still depends. Like sometimes when people say, it just depends who it comes from. When people say, "Do I call you black or do I call you African American?" Or like, what do I?
Yeah.
It's like, but then if someone like you can tell the sincerity, and I don't know, but like you said, people
Yeah.
get pricked, and sometimes you selectively unconsciously choose who you are pricked by, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
you internalize it differently per person. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Even like you, I don't know if you've seen the movie Get Out, where they say I would have voted for Obama 3 times. It's just like
Yeah.
the sentiment with
Yeah.
the words even doesn't feel right, even if they're
Yeah.
trying to find a way to navigate something. I think it's that like when you're trying to dance with a new partner, you are stepping on each other's toes and moving in directions that
Yeah.
aren't necessarily going with the beat or the music, and then
Yeah.
just finding that rhythm is just uncomfortable on both sides. But it's worse when one like over indexes like too much on the other and trying to relate or use things that aren't natural to them in order to kind of come together. So yes, I don't even, I think I was just off the rails there, but yes.
I actually love that analogy. It is because it is kind of like dancing, and learning how to get along with someone else is like learning another
Yes,
person's all their things.
because you have
And
your norms and you have social norms, but then
yeah,
like you were saying, Dr. Phil, it depends on where you are geographically, that those can be shifted anywhere, and then you also don't know where someone grew up or the value system they had. It's a big gumbo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People also, well, I mean, and we know this, but um, dialect, regional dialect
yes,
bothers people, and they associate that with education.
yeah.
Uh,
I grew up in Memphis actually, and then I went to school in the North. And when I got there, the professor said something, and I said, "Why?" And he said, "What? Why? What?
right.
Why?" And I consciously, I think we talked about this before, Wesley, but I consciously changed my accent.
Yeah.
And now I kind of wish I hadn't, actually, in fact, but it was too much to like get over that stereotype about my intelligence.
Yeah, I code
Because of
switch
this,
a lot. Code
yeah.
switch a lot too. But so if you talk about, I don't know the direction, but let's talk about some of the things that, like, just real quick, and this is probably means nothing, but that I've interacted with, right? Like, I'm 6 feet, and don't get me wrong, in high school I was a 5-sport letterman. In college, I played football at the University of Missouri. Semi-pro, went to the league, all those kind of things. But everybody automatically walks up to me. You're an athlete, or you play sports or something. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? And then, like, it was so funny. So my son, so when he was a little baby, the only thing he did was walk. I don't know. And everybody's like, oh, look, he's going to be an athlete when he get older. And I'm like, what? Where you make that assumption?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, so I was a principal. I was assistant principal and principal around 26. I was the youngest superintendent. I was a superintendent around 32, 34. And so I had all my degrees by the age of 30. And so imagine, and this, I mean, people will walk up to me and it will be my assistant superintendent, it will be my secretary, I don't care who it is. And male secretary, male teacher, and people will walk up to them and say, "Hello, Dr. Hickman," and shake their hands. And I always just sit there like, and they're always like, "No, this is Dr. Hickman," And whether
Wow.
it's an age, so it can be the same race as someone, or whether it's a different race, like those things are every time, and I don't mean to monopolize, but every time, and this is still, even when I'm in an MBA program and people say, I always thought you would be older. Because they read my resume. They're like, I thought you would be older. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, when people have that, they form an image, an expectation in their head, and you don't conform to it. I think I see that sometimes when I go to meetings too. In this world where we're doing a lot of virtual meetings, sometimes our first encounter will be a virtual meeting where the camera's on, and they see my name, which is pretty Anglo, Wesley Faulkner. And when we get on the call, you see it in their eyes, right? You see that recognition, that surprise, and that confusion. And it's really hard to hide. And that is something that I'm keenly aware of from these calls to when I make an appointment at a new place, or go to a doctor, or go to, I don't know, the airport, or even when I show up for a job interview, that their surprise in their eyes is almost like, now, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Like, what is the thing that they had in their head, and what do I now need to live up to in order for them not to feel disappointed?
No, you're right.
So how do you deal with it? What do you do when you see that surprise? Do you mention it, or do you?
I learned not to flinch. I mean, that's the number one rule, is that you see it and then you don't recognize it, because of that distance between knowing someone and making them uncomfortable. And usually, unfortunately, in those interaction, there's a power dynamic where it's now up to me to take care of their feelings, because they can influence how things go.
No, but he's right. He's right.
Yeah, no, I know he's right.
My whole life doing that. You're right. And you're right. It's not cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
what do you do?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing. When I don't embarrass the people for saying I'm Dr. Hickman. I just try to continue the conversation and be gentle to make sure they're not uncomfortable. But he's right. You start to placate to their emotions and feelings.
And sometimes I think the bias, when you point it out, people still can't get over it. Like one time I was on a board of directors, and we had to go into a room where there was a lot of security. And somebody came, and the security person walked in, and he pointed at me and he said, "You're not on my list." And I said, "My name is Kim Scott." And he looked at his list and he said, "There's no woman on my list." And now I know what's going on. I said, "Well, my name is Kim Scott. Do you want to see my driver's license?" And he's like, "There wasn't a woman on my list."
Wow.
but there is and I didn't want to, he's like going to prevent me from going in the room. So I didn't want to get angry about it. So again, now I'm like trying to gently explain to him that I am Kim Scott and I am a woman, even though he didn't expect me to be. And it's tricky.
Yeah. Wow. But a name like that also is sometimes gender neutral in other cultures. Like in Asian cultures, Kim is a male. So
and also often Kim is can be a man. I know several Kims who are men who aren't Asian. It's like a gender. In fact, my name is not Kimberly, it's Kimball, so it's even worse.
Wow.
Yeah, or not worse, but it's even more gender neutral.
Wow.
Yeah. So
world is upside down, topsy-turvy, and we're all just trying to do that weird dance. And it is those people who are more set in their ways, maybe those who didn't read enough, to to be able to have that flexible framing of how the world is actually more different and more vast than their own personal experience.
Oh man, to address biases in people is an attack on their character. It's an attack on their self, their being. And I'm talking about to go through a workshop, not me address them, but for for anyone to internalize their biases and bring them up to the conscious level, like that is attack on. Yeah, it's real hard.
And I feel a little bit like we're at this moment in time, like with all this book banning and stuff. I feel like it's an Oedipal moment, not in the usual sense of of an Oedipal moment, but when Oedipus realized what he had done wrong, that he had murdered his father and married his mother, what did he do with that new understanding? He gouged his eyes out. It was like a very violent metaphor, and I feel like that's what this book banning, and that's what sometimes people want to do when you when you point out their bias to them. They can't cope with it, and so they don't gouge their own eyes out, they gouge your eyes out.
Well, politics is a little bit different. I mean, I have to believe that some people don't believe the stances that they're making. It's polarized based on. I mean, you cannot be serious, But hey, I tell you, so when you start thinking about the change of times, so when I was a superintendent in Houston, we had a strong Hispanic, strong Catholic population. So
and what year is this?
2015.
Okay.
And we had a student that 1 minute in first grade or maybe kindergarten, it was a boy, and then in first grade, totally hair, dressed like a girl, wanted to go to the girls' bathroom and all that. And so of course the dads were very upset. And immediately my principal had that student go to the nurse's bathroom. Well, come to find out, we're in violation of that child's rights.
Yeah.
That the child was able, and then it was like all kind of like the panic, not the kids, the adults, right?
Yes.
And so the other band that they were trying to do is that for this teacher, there's always a student goes down the rotation that gets to pass out the paper towels in the restroom for the kids to wash their hands. And so they didn't want this kid to pass out the paper towel. They didn't want them to have that responsibility in the bathroom because
first grader.
So it was. Yeah, so I mean, it was. Imagine the parents that were in my office and they were very upset. That this, and it's going to rub off on the rest of the kids and all those kind of things. Yeah, it's the world is different, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of biases in the world.
Can I ask you about something, because you brought up HISD, and just recently the state has taken control of the school system, and they're converting libraries into like disciplinary spaces. And so are you still in touch with the people there? Are you familiar with what's going on related to that?
I'm in touch with people, but not that's going on. I didn't
I grew up in Houston, so that's why I heard about it. And I was like, say what now?
Gosh.
So not only are they like banning books, they're closing libraries and then turning them to places of discipline, which is really scary. But sorry to.
So they send kids to the library when they misbehave?
Yes.
Running out of space.
Wow.
No, so closing libraries. So I go back and forth on closing libraries.
Okay.
One is these babies are digital natives. Like at 2 years old, matter of fact, I promise you, go to a store or restaurant, infants have iPads and phones in their little basket and they're flipping. I mean, before they even get to one, right? So this is a true digital native population. And the paper is us. Like we feel like in order for a child to learn how to read, they have to flip a page. And there's only 5 ways to learn how to read. And it has nothing to do with the texture of a page or those things. And it's weird because a library only holds so much, where technology you can access any text as possible. So some of that stuff is where it was almost like the revolution of they stopped teaching cursive in school. Like the older generation, they are livid that they don't teach cursive, and I'm like, when do you use cursive? When? To make a signature. Well, they need to learn how to. Well, if you're saying we need to teach them how to write a signature, we can teach them how to write a signature. And by the way, I can't read your signature, so chicken scratch counts as a signature.
Yeah.
But so it's other things that are. So in other words, I'm just saying it's things that are very polarizing. That it's hard. It's hard because they tug at your heart. Like we lived through the books era. Even my children who are 23 and 18 and 14, they're still kind of hybrid, So if you eliminate libraries for them, they love holding stacks of books and reading them. But I'm telling you, this younger generation, it's different.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Valid point.
But you can put computers with internet access in libraries.
Centers. Media centers. Although people call them media centers and there's still no technology in them.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes. I've been around the United States. Yes.
What's in there then?
The same. It's just the same. It's just, for some reason, they just changed the name.
It's still a library. It's still a bunch of books, but it's called a media center. Okay.
And not an attack on books or literature. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We also. I mean, it's hard. Like I haven't figured out emotionally that fine line. And you definitely couldn't go to a school district. Well, apparently in Houston, but you couldn't go to a school district and take away libraries and those kind of things.
I think you should at least maintain the space. I think space does dictate at least the kind of environment, right? Depending on like cold, hard, windows as opposed to air. I think space does help with getting in the zone. And so even if there aren't any physical books, or maybe there are only a few physical books, I think having at least a space that's maintained for the expansion of knowledge, I think is still important rather than seen as a place that you don't ever want to go because that's where you get corrected.
You know what I heard about libraries? I was asking a bunch of high school kids recently, like what do they do in the library? And what they told me is they make out in the library. That's so all kinds of stuff is happening in the library.
It's conducive for it. There's so many nooks and crannies.
It's quiet.
Books that nobody is touching the books, but they're hiding behind the shelves. Yeah.
Yep. I think you have just nailed the coffin on shelves and books in the library.
Let's get rid of them. Doors. Now the kids are really interested in going to the library. And, they need to, like, we want them to talk to each other in person again. My kids, I have 14-year-olds and they it's hard to get them to like get together in person. So
there's a Friends episode about Ross Geller's book. In the back of the library where no one went. And so that's where people went to make out. And so he started patrolling that area just so people weren't doing things untoward in the same area as his book. But anyway, sorry, Dr. Phil, go for it.
Adults also carry biases and it travels out into their actions, let's say in the schools. For instance, let's go back to libraries. If a student picks up a book and they check it out and they don't like it, they make them read that book. But as an adult, if you pick up a book and you don't like it, you move on to another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute. No, the student has to read that book because they picked it up. What? Like
that is a way to prevent kids from experimenting.
But that is probably 95% of how it's done. Seriously.
Really? Wow.
That's traumatizing.
That is. That's upsetting. All right. Shall we declare victory? We figured out how to deal with bias. We're going to solve all the world's problems.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really, in all seriousness, Dr. Phil, and is that what you want us to call you, Dr. Phil? Is that really?
Why don't you want to call me that? Because I don't look like him?
You look like you look like you have totally changed my image of what and who Dr. Phil is.
That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
What it's about.
But I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate the work you're doing in the world. It's so important, and I'm deeply grateful to you for all of the above.
No, I appreciate you guys, and this was a great opportunity to actually. I mean, your excerpt, I learned some things, right? And so I do appreciate that. I still
that was
think
my purple flag.
I still think it's goodness gracious.
Ouch.
It's okay.
You too.
So I just want to say, y'all.
In all fairness, and listen. Here's something that's funny. When I say you guys, I'm actually trying to. I'm actually trying to be
switching.
Right. No, I'm actually trying to be sensitive. It's like, I failed.
No, you didn't fail. Look, I tell you, it is very difficult to change vocabulary. And in fact, my daughter, who goes to an all-girls school, although it's not clear what all girls means anymore, since a lot of those children don't identify as girls. But anyway, she goes to this school, or they go to this school, and they say you guys all the time. So it's like we're kind of shuffling the deck on gender.
No, I mean he's right, but the I think the other issue that you guys already addressed was
you all. It is hard to change.
Because I'm gonna tell you why. Why. Because you talked about having I say a shared understanding, but a shared vocabulary. So the only way that you can change behavior if you have a replacement behavior that's inconsistent, right? So replacement vocabulary. No one has given me a replacement vocabulary. So I'm going to always revert back to my instincts and tell consciously, Wesley, I'm waiting for an appropriate replacement word that I can use, which is
y'all.
Y'all. Well, I say y'all all the time, and we get in trouble for saying y'all.
You do?
Oh, yeah. Midwest and Southern people say y'all. So if you go to the East Coast, they look at you like you're crazy. Or they ask you how to spell it. You all. Because it's you all.
Yeah, you all.
Yes. Say y'all. So if I say y'all, you're gonna get my
I'm not, because that's what I say, but other people might.
Well, funny enough, we actually covered this same topic in our previous episode right before this one, about how habits are really hard to change. And we need to give grace, and we need to give them time to be able to make the transition, because it won't happen overnight. And like you're saying, you can't change a habit you formed over years, decades in one episode of a podcast.
And you got to figure out what to say instead. You're right. Folks. How about folks?
No, folks, you're right. Folks is a good one too. So you have to direct teach behavior. So it's the same thing. What schools are supposed to do is it's called MTSS, multi-tier systems of support. The reason why that's important is if a student is failing in math, what do? We give them remediation. If a student is failing in behavior, we kick them out. So the problem is that you have to direct teach behavior and direct teach skills, shared understanding, vocabulary, all those kind of, how to deal with the situation. And other than that, they're going to keep coming back doing it, just like you all have noticed. We keep doing the same thing over and over again until we are taught replacement behavior. So, this
words of wisdom. Words of wisdom to end on.
We're all struggling in our own way. Yeah, I know I am. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If people wanted to find you online or hear about this, your startup about learning how to read using AI, where would they go?
So one, find me is Dr. Phil is on LinkedIn, so you can look me up that way. But as far as my website, it's www.playbookeducation.com, and that's playbook spelled PLABOOK education.com, and the tool or product for reading is called Playbook. The reason why I didn't misspell it, and as a reading tool, I wouldn't misspell a word, but it is a great conversation because everybody asks, why would you misspell a reading word? But because it's a multi-syllabic word, the vowel can scream its name. So playbook instead of playbook, playbook is one of the appropriate ways to say it.
Oh, that's clever. Yeah, and I bet the domain was available as well, so that helps.
Hey.
Well, thank you for joining us. And if you are listening to this episode and you want to give us feedback, please send us an email at hello@justworktogether.com while we still have it. And if you want to rate us and review us on your favorite podcast listener, we would love to get your 5 stars if you have it. And thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care, everyone.
All right.